Alright, now that we have a basic understanding of the Pathfinder tools, we're going to go on and we're going to do a little bit more. This time we're going to add rulers and grids and guides and smart guides and even rotations, reflections, and scaling. The reason why is because we want to be very precise when we use the Pathfinder, and so these tools allow us to be. Let's create a new web document at the default size. That's fine. Now, in order to view our guides and everything else, we need to go ahead and view a few things. Number one, we're going to show our rulers. We can also use Control R to do this. Now, I'm currently in points, so points means that we have 72 points, makes up an inch, basically. We should know that as we start to look at our grids as well. The next thing that we can do is view our grids. So I'm going to show the grid, and you'll see that basically our grid follows that 72 points, and it's divided into 8. Now we can see this if we go to our preferences and we go to guides and grids. You'll see that we can show what our color of our guides will be, which is the cyan color by default. I don't really like it that much, so I'm going to go to the light blue. And then you can also see that we have our grid here. Now this grid is a little bit light, so I'm going to just make it a little bit darker just so we can see it a little bit better. And you'll see that we have a grid line every 72 pixels, and that's divided into 8. So maybe that made it a little bit darker, but not a whole lot. Now the reason that I'm creating this is because I want to make sure that I can snap to my grid. So I'm going to go ahead and snap to that grid as well. Now what this allows me to do is when I create a box, I can make sure it is exactly the size that I want. And this is going to be good when we want to be precise in our drawing. So go ahead and create a rectangle which is exactly that size. And I'm actually going to go back and switch the colors so that we have black fill as well. The next thing I'm going to do is create a box, go from the center point, and I'm going to have that basically fit, there you go, right over the center of that. And I'm going to do the same thing there on the other side, and that goes out too. And so now what we've done is we've made a very perfect, I guess, boxy shape here thing, and it's separated, it's 1 inch in all directions kind of thing. Now I'm going to make a copy of that, and I'm going to duplicate it to the next inch, and then I'm going to duplicate it a few times. In fact, if I duplicate it so I have 6 of them, it'll give me enough for the different exercises that I'm going to do here. Now, one of the things that we can do just to make sure that we have things aligned is go ahead and drag down our guides, and you can see that that's going to be our center point for all the different objects. We didn't need to do it here because we did that exactly the way we want, but let's say that we want to drag one down here to this next line, because I'm going to be using that in a minute for the next exercise. Now with these Pathfinder tools, I'm going to select the first group here. Oh, by the way, I should point out this guide here can be moved, and I really don't want it to be, so I'm going to go to View, Guides, and then lock them so they cannot be moved. Alright, now let me go on. Now with this first one right here, one of the things that we'll do often is go ahead and group a whole lot of shapes or unite a lot of shapes into one simple object. And that's really easy to do. You just select them all and it creates one simple object. Now sometimes it works to select a bunch of objects and sometimes it doesn't. And let's go to the next one and you'll see what I mean. If I do minus front and I click, what I'm trying to get is just these 4 little squares in the corner. And so one way to do that is just click ahead and it works just fine. But the problem is it's hard to visualize that. It's a lot easier to visualize when you take the 2 objects that you want to be united into one simple object, and now you can see that what's left over is just these 4 squares on the outside. So if I take the top object and I delete it from the bottom object, that's what minus front does, I know I'll get just those 4 squares. Now here's where that might actually show a more obvious version of this. If I go to the next one and I just click on the third item of intersect, the question is, when it does this intersect, it's going to intersect all of the objects. And so that means that all I'm going to get is just that little square in the middle. And what I'd really like to get is this cross, but I'd like the cross to fit to the size of the square. So instead, here what I'll do is unite the cross in there, then select the square in the background, and then do the intersect. And that will give me just the square cross that I had there. Now we can do a similar thing if we select those two, actually select all three, and go to the last item. This is what we get. But if we do the first one and unite them together first, then go to the last item, then we get something a little bit different. And so you need to be aware of this particular ability for you to go ahead and unite shapes and cut shapes and do things in steps. It's very common when working with Illustrator to not do it, and the Pathfinder, to not do it all at once. Now, the next thing that I want to do is just take a look at being able to duplicate objects and keep things aligned. If I create a box from this center point right here, and it doesn't have to fit all the way, I'm not going to be too picky. Now it's pretty easy for us to just go ahead to the next line, and we know that we can, if we're snapping to it and we've got snap to grid on, then it's going to go exactly where we want and do what we want. You know, if we go to these points here, I can go from there and do another point. But let's say that I want to get this square to duplicate over to the other side. In order to do this, of course, we can always go to the black arrow and duplicate it, and since things are snapping, that works really great. But another way to do this is to use the reflect tool. So the reflect tool will allow me to reflect this to a different place. But what I need to do is show where it's going to reflect from. And you'll see there's a little point there in the middle, and that little cross in the middle is the reflection point. If you hold down the Alt key, you can move this to a different point. So let me move that down to there. And what this does is this comes up with the dialog box for reflect. When you use the Alt key and then you click, now what it does is allows me to move this to a horizontal, and if I preview that, you'll see it's moved down to the other side, and then I can just choose copy, and it's made a quick copy of that. Now if I want to duplicate that to the other side of that box, I can select both. Go to the reflect tool. I know that it's going to go into the center of that, and then I'm going to press the Alt key right there, and then I'm going to do this as vertical, and you'll see it previews it to the other side. That's perfect. I'll choose copy, and I've quickly made a copy of that. Now this can be really, really cool because we can also start to play around and do some other neat things. For example, let's say that I want to make 2 more copies of this that are going to be kind of in an arc. What I'm going to do is now go to the rotate tool, and I'm going to click in between there, right on that blue line again, and straight down from that point. Boom. Now what I'm going to do is, let's see what happens if I change my angle to, let's see, I need 45, is that correct? No, I need 30 because I want to divide that in 3. So by the way, when you do that, what you have to do is sometimes click off of it. It's kind of annoying sometimes. So I know it's 30. Maybe if I click on the preview, there you go. I click on that preview, it'll show that to me again. Maybe 45 was what I wanted. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, it's 60 degrees because it's 180 and I wanted 2 that way. Haha. So I'm going to actually change that to -60. Click on that preview again, and there it goes to the right-hand side. Now what I can do is copy and then duplicate that, and you'll see I actually did pull it off. I just don't know what my angles are. So I should have thought about it, but you have 180 degrees from one side to the other, so that means if I divided it into thirds, I would have that. So go ahead and play with the reflect, the rotate, and even the scale tool and the shear tool, because these all kind of work by you creating a center point and then playing with them, and see what you can come up with to create some really cool looking designs. And